Sometimes the cruelest thing isn't being forgotten. It's being seen and deliberately ignored. Being a mother doesn't mean you can't feel pain. Being a mother doesn't mean you should stay silent forever. Let me tell you what happened that day. I wore my sky blue blouse, the one with tiny seashell buttons he used to play with as a toddler. I even put on the same silver earrings he'd given me for Mother's Day when he was 12, before he arrived. I looked in the mirror, hoping to see myself through his eyes. All I saw was a tired older woman in a head wrap, trying not to look like a shadow of her former self. Still, I smiled. I hoped it would be one of those days we could laugh about later. Maybe I'd say something silly, and he'd roll his eyes while Serena offered one of her delicate smiles. Maybe they'd let me help fold the napkins or taste the frosting. I was still his mom. I thought that meant something. He came in without knocking, smelling of aftershave and assurance. Julian didn't even glance at the pastries I had arranged or the tea I'd brewed from the same loose leaves he begged for as a boy. He sat on the very edge of the couch like he had somewhere else to be. I was already standing when he said it, but I felt as if the ground gave out beneath me. "I think it's better if you don't come to the wedding," he said, like it was a favor, as if I should thank him for saving me the trouble. My fingers hovered near a teacup I hadn't even picked up. I asked him what he meant, though part of me already knew. It's a very curated event," he said, adjusting his shirt collar. "It's got a modern, minimal vibe. Serena and I both feel the guest list should reflect that." I gave a confused little laugh. "You don't want your mother in your wedding pictures?" I asked. He shifted. "It's not about the photos, it's about presentation." "You've been unwell," he continued. "The scarf, the coughing, it could make some people uncomfortable." My heart cracked a little. "You'd be a distraction, Mom," he said, and I hated how formal it sounded. "You know we love you, but Serena wants a specific look, a certain kind of experience." He didn't get to finish. She walked in without knocking too. Serena, tall, thin, face like a beauty ad. She didn't even look at me. Just scanned the room like she caught a whiff of something sour. "So this is the place," she said. "Cozy, very vintage." "This is my mother," Julian told her. She nodded without looking at me. "Nice to meet you." I stood there in my own home, feeling like a visitor. "I'd like to be there," I said softly. "I can sit in the back. I don't want any attention. I just want to watch my son get married." That's when she looked at me. Really looked. Her eyes were ice. "We've already finalized the seating and dress code," she said. "I'm sure you understand. It's about the mood." I turned to Julian, waiting for him to step in. He didn't. "She's sick," Serena added. "I mean, you're sick. It's admirable you're trying, but the scarf, the pale skin, it's going to make guests uneasy." Julian chimed in. "We can send you pictures. We'll even FaceTime you in. It'll be like you're there." "I don't want a FaceTime link," I said softly. "I want to be in the room." Serena smiled, but it wasn't a kind one. "Maybe after the honeymoon we can talk about long-term care." Serena said, "Someplace clean, peaceful, a good spot for recovery." She meant a nursing home. "I know what you mean," I said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Julian said. "I'm trying to be respectful." I looked at him, really looked. The same eyes I used to sing to sleep. The same jawline I used to kiss before school. Where did that boy go? "I gave you everything," I whispered. "Everything I had." He sighed and stood. "And I appreciate that, but you can't keep guilt-tripping me forever." Then he said it. "This is why Dad left you." I went still inside. He said it like a weapon, like he'd been holding it for years just waiting to strike. And it landed right where he wanted it to. It was cruel, but worse. It was wrong. I had shielded him for years from that truth, carried it like a secret cross on my back. Michael hadn't left because of me. He left because he was small. Afraid. Incapable of loving someone who had traded her youth for survival. But I never told Julian. I painted his father in softer tones than he deserved, thinking it might soften life for him. All those birthdays I told him Daddy's just working late, all those nights I tucked him in with stories instead of answers. And now, this. My silence had come back to wound me, clean and precise. I didn't answer. I just sat down slowly, hands trembling on my knees. The tea was still warm. Untouched, so were the pastries. Serena turned toward the door. "We'll be in touch. Let us know how the treatments go." Julian leaned down and kissed the top of my scarf, It felt like someone touching a gravestone. "We love you, Mom. We really do." And then they left. Just like that. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood, walked to the window, and watched their car disappear. Then I whispered into the emptiness, "Thank you for showing me who you really are." I reached for the scarf at my neck and tightened it, not to hide anything, but to hold myself together. Something inside me had shifted. I had something left to do. And he was going to find out, one way or another, what happens when a mother who gave everything has nothing left to lose. Not rage, not bitterness, just clarity. I didn't cry that night. I didn't curse or plead or scream at God. I sat in silence, wrapped in the faded flannel robe I've had since Julian was in high school. My thin hands folded neatly in my lap. The lights in the living room were still on, but the whole house felt darker somehow, like the shadows themselves were listening. My breath came shallow and raspy from the chemo, but I didn't care. I just stared out the window at the street lamp, blinking above the empty road, remembering the days when that same light would shine down on Julian coming home from school, backpack bouncing, always hungry, always talking. Now it's just me and the weight of every word he said. "You'll ruin the photos, you'll make everyone uncomfortable. This is why Dad left you." That last one cut deepest. But I knew why Michael left, because he was a coward. Not because of anything I did. He didn't want to be a father, didn't want to work 2 jobs. Didn't want to love a woman marked by stretch lines and fatigue like battle scars. I never told Julian the truth. I always said his father was tired, not absent, broken, not cruel. I let him believe, maybe, just maybe, Michael had loved him once. That was the least I could do. Julian is grown now, handsome, accomplished, cold, just like his father. I rose slowly from the recliner, my joints aching from the cold and chemo, and shuffled toward the hallway. Each step echoed, reminding me I was alone. My bedroom was neat, the bed made, my Bible still open on the nightstand where I left it that morning. I went to the closet and knelt, slowly, painfully, before the old metal file cabinet. At the bottom, beneath tax returns and birth certificates, was a folder marked in black ink, "Final." I pulled it out, carried it to the bed, and opened it carefully. Inside were neatly clipped pages, my will, my life insurance policies, deeds to 3 rental properties, and bank statements with balances that would surprise even me. I'd never lived flashy. I still use coupons at the grocery store, still trim my own nails, still wear the same Sunday flats from 1998, but I've got money. I built a quiet fortune, bit by bit, over the years. I remember the first place I bought, a rundown duplex just across the avenue. The neighbor, an old widower, had passed and his family didn't want the hassle. I had just received a small inheritance from my uncle and used it to place a bid. I rented it out, fixed it up little by little, and soon there was some extra money each month. So I bought another property, then a third, then a share in a local flower shop. When my church friend Denise needed help opening it, I pitched in. No one knew. Not even Julian. It was going to be a surprise. That had been the plan. I pictured the day I'd pass, a quiet service, dignified. And then Myra would hand Julian the letter. Inside it would say, "You always thought I had nothing, but I saved this for you. I wanted you to know I believed in your future." But that day will never come now. I looked around my modest little house, still smelling faintly of lavender and old tea, and for a moment I let myself feel it all. The years I worked overtime, the meals I skipped, the shoes I resold instead of replaced. Not because I didn't want better, but because I wanted Julian to have the best. Every penny saved wasn't just money, it was proof that I mattered. That even when no one saw me, I had built something solid with my bare hands, something meant to last beyond me. I picked up the will and stared at the signature at the bottom, Celeste Harper. Just above it, Julian Harper. My only child, my only heir. I reached into my nightstand, pulled open the drawer, and took out my letter opener, a beautiful gold one Julian had given me back when he was still in college. My initials were engraved at the base in tiny script. I used it to slice the will in half, then into quarters, then into eighths. After that, I felt lighter, like I could breathe again. The next morning, I called Myra Caldwell, my oldest friend from church and also my attorney. We'd known each other since we were 19, back when we sang in the youth choir and still thought life would be simpler. Myra picked up on the second ring. "Celeste," she said, voice groggy from sleep. You okay?" "No," I replied, "but I will be. Can you come over this afternoon? I need to rewrite my will." There was a pause. "This about Julian?" she asked. "He came by yesterday. I figured when I saw the wedding announcement, no mention of you. He asked me not to come, said I'd mess up the aesthetic." Myra didn't say anything more. "And Serena," I added, my tone sharp. "She called me a liability, said I should be placed in a home." Julian just stood there. Another silence. "Bring the new documents," I said. "I already know who I want everything to go to." "You sure about this?" "I'm dying, Myra, but not today. Today I'm just taking back what's mine." Myra exhaled. "I'll bring everything." I hung up and walked to the kitchen. I brewed a pot of tea, buttered a slice of toast, and sat down with a yellow legal pad. I started writing a new letter. Not to Julian, but to the new beneficiary, the Magnolia Haven Trust, a women's refuge in Mississippi that houses elderly women discarded by their families. I volunteered there in my younger days, painted the walls, served meals, even sat and read scripture. Women too weak to do it themselves. Women like me now. Women no one visits. Women no one remembers. Women people want hidden so they don't ruin the scene. I finished my toast and started drafting my final directions. The house would go to the foundation. The rental properties would be sold. The profits donated. The flower shop would remain under Denise's name. The bank accounts would be transferred within 30 days of my death. No funeral, no obituary photo, just a letter, signed and sealed. To Julian Harper. I raised you better than this. I loved you more than life itself, and you discarded me for a woman who never once looked me in the eye. So now you get nothing. I won't bury my money beside someone who buried me while I was still breathing. Goodbye. I set the pen down and looked back out the window. The streetlight had gone out. Morning sunlight was breaking through the clouds. A new day. A new will. A new ending. This time, I'd be the one writing it. Just past noon, Myra Caldwell arrived, carrying a black briefcase and 2 manila folders. She didn't knock, she knew better. I hated being treated like a client. We'd been friends since we were young women in choir robes, sneaking mints during Easter rehearsals. We'd guarded each other's secrets, mourned at each other's funerals, and grown old together like oak and stone, steady, weathered, and unshakable. When I opened the door, scarf tied like a crown, moving slower than I used to, Myra didn't say a word. She just stepped inside and placed her case on the dining table. "I made tea," I said, "but it's cold now." "Doesn't matter," she replied. "We've got work to do." I sat across from her and pulled over the yellow legal pad where I had started my instructions the night before. My handwriting was shaky in spots, the ink trailing off whenever my strength had failed me, but the message was there. I slid the paper across the table. Myra read through it silently, then reached into her folder, pulled out a blank set of legal forms, and began drafting a new will from scratch. I watched her in silence for a long moment before speaking. "Did I ever tell you why I started saving money?" Myra didn't look up. "You said it was so Julian would never go without." "That was part of it," I said. "But it wasn't all. I'd seen too many women die broke. Women who'd worked just as hard as I had. Women who'd given their lives to ungrateful husbands, ungrateful children, jobs that paid them in dust. I swore to myself I wouldn't go out like that." "You won't," Myra said, scribbling at the bottom of a form. "You're going out loud." I smiled. I had planned to surprise him, leave him everything, even the letters. I had written one for every birthday until he turned 50, all tucked inside an old shoebox. Myra paused. "What are you going to do with them now?" "I'll burn them," I said. "He doesn't get those anymore. He doesn't get me." We worked in silence for the next hour. I gave her account numbers, property deeds, the name of my banker at Union Reserve, and the paperwork for the flower shop I co-owned with Denise Miller. I even handed over an envelope of emergency cash, $10,000 in rubber-banded stacks, labeled, "In case the world ends," hidden in my sewing drawer. Myra recorded every asset, every dollar, every belonging worth noting. At the top of the new will, I dictated the name of the sole beneficiary, the Magnolia Haven Trust. Myra raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to give them everything?" "They've never asked me to hide who I am," I said. "They don't care what I look like. They don't treat old women like furniture someone forgot to move." "You don't want to leave anything to Julian?" she asked softly. I stared at the window. The curtains were closed, but light still poured through. I already left him my whole life. That's enough. Myra nodded and resumed writing. By the time we finished, my hand was trembling just from signing my name. Myra slid the will in front of me. I picked up the pen and pressed it to paper. My signature wasn't as graceful as it once was, but it was mine, and it was final. I also wrote a letter. I told Myra that once the last document was signed, the letter was to be handed to him. Not yet, I said. Let him have his wedding. Let him smile in his tux, show off his new bride. Let him think he's won. Myra glanced at me. And then? Then you give him the envelope, I said, right in front of everyone. Celeste, she said gently, you really want to make a scene? I'm not making a scene. I'm ending one. He started it the day he said I was too ugly to be seen. Myra nodded solemnly. We sat in silence a while longer, the legal papers now stacked neatly in her briefcase. The envelope sat sealed on the table. My breath had grown shallow again, my skin pale, nearly transparent under the kitchen lights. But there was a fire in my eyes that hadn't burned this brightly in years. You think I'm being cruel? I asked quietly. Myra reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. No, she said. I think you're being honest, and I think he's lucky you didn't do worse. I chuckled. Don't tempt me. We both laughed, a sound that felt like Sundays, potlucks, and choir robes, like joy still had a place in my lungs. But beneath it all, something heavier lingered, something permanent. The truth of a woman who had given everything and now had nothing left to lose. When Myra stood to leave, I handed her the manila envelope with Julian's name on it. Hold on to this, I said, and promise me one thing. What's that? Don't let him cry and change your mind. You give it to him exactly when I said. Myra nodded. I promise. I walked her to the door, slower now, one hand on the wall for balance. I watched her drive away, then I locked the door behind her. The house was quiet again, too quiet. I turned off the lights and made my way back to the bedroom. There, under the bed, sat the shoebox of birthday letters. I carried them to the kitchen, one at a time, and fed each one into the trash bin, tearing them in half before letting go. The letter for his 30th birthday. The one for his wedding anniversary. The one that began, if you're ever feeling lost, remember, you are always my son, before anything else. Each letter held a memory. A moment I had saved, not just in words, but in love. I had written them with trembling hands and hopeful eyes, imagining him opening them one by one, year after year. But now, those same pages felt like lies, testaments to a love that was never returned. As I tore them, I didn't just discard paper. I let go of a future that would never be. Gone. By the time I finished, my hands smelled like ash and ink, but my heart felt clean. I walked to the sink, washed my hands slowly, and looked at my reflection in the window. The scarf still wrapped around my head, my skin worn thin, my bones visible beneath my robe. But my eyes, those were alive. I'm not done yet, I whispered to myself, and when I'm done, the whole world will know my name. The invitation came in a thick, cream-colored envelope, gold-trimmed and embossed. I found it in my mailbox 4 days before the wedding, wedged between a coupon flyer and a letter from my oncologist. I knew right away it wasn't from Julian. The return address was someone else entirely, cousin Ramona from Talila. The kind of relative who always made it to every family gathering with a pan of something sweet and a mouthful of whispers. I stood on my porch, opening the envelope carefully, my fingers trembling slightly from the meds. Inside was a folded card, cursive script dancing across the surface, and a glossy photo of Julian and Serena on the cover. They stood beneath a white archway, her in a fitted gown, him in a tux, his arm around her waist. His arm rested casually around her waist, their smiles wide and flawless. I studied the photo for a long time, as if waiting for a crack to appear in their expressions. There was none. I opened the card. The ceremony had been moved to a vineyard on the edge of Savannah, an outdoor affair surrounded by white roses and curated elegance. Beneath the address, in smaller print, was a note. We'd love for you to join us and celebrate this special day. Quietly, of course. Please sit in the designated family section and respect the couple's wishes. With love, Ramona, I chuckled softly. Of course, I pictured Julian approving that invite as a gesture, a token gesture tossed like a bone toward guilt. Or maybe it was all Serena's idea, her way of appearing gracious without ever having to apologize. Either way, the message was clear. I could attend, so long as I remained invisible. I folded the card with care and placed it on the kitchen counter. I didn't need long to decide. I would go. Not for them, for me. On the morning of the wedding, I rose before the sun. The house was still. The light hadn't yet touched the sky. I bathed slowly, methodically, my hands lingering over my skin as if I were memorizing what strength I had left. I dressed in a soft, dove-gray suit, the one I wore on Easter Sundays, wrapped my head in a deep blue scarf, stitched in silver thread. I pinned on the brooch my mother gave me at graduation, a small silver dove, worn but gleaming. My reflection gave me pause. My body looked smaller, more delicate than I remembered, but my eyes, they were still mine. And today I had something to finish. For so long I had been written out of the script, tucked away like clutter in the attic of their perfect story. But today, even in silence, I would take back my place. I would not be a ghost at my own son's triumph. I would be present, unshaken, and unashamed. Myra arrived right on time, dressed in a navy pantsuit and sensible heels. She brought the manila envelope in her briefcase, sealed and marked with Julian's name. I handed her a small black purse. Inside were tissues, a bottle of water, and a second envelope. "That one's for Serena," I said. "Give it to her afterward." Myra gave me a long look. "You sure you're up for this?" I nodded. "I just want to see it. Once. I want to see how far he thinks he's come." We rode in silence, the car humming gently as the vineyard appeared in the distance. The estate was breathtaking. Rows of green vines rolling over the hills, guests in champagne and pastels mingling beneath white tents and fairy lights. A quartet played soft jazz by the front path. I sat in the car for a moment, taking it all in. "He went all out," Myra murmured. "Not with my money," I replied under my breath. We stepped out together, Myra steadying me as we made our way toward the family seating. A few guests glanced over. Polite nods were exchanged. No one recognized me. No one knew that the woman in the scarf and gray suit was the reason this entire wedding was possible. I sat in the third row, silent, just as requested. From my seat I could see the altar, the guests, the raised platform where the vows would be spoken. I took a small sip from my water bottle and waited. The ceremony began. A few minutes later, Julian walked down the aisle, sharp, composed, proud. Serena followed, stunning in a fitted gown that shimmered in the sun. The crowd sighed in admiration. I didn't. My eyes never left Julian. He didn't look my way. The officiant began the ceremony, speaking of unity, of trust, of honoring those who helped raise you. I watched Julian closely. He shifted slightly at the word parents, but he never turned around. The vows were long. Serena cried during hers. Julian smiled, charming, charismatic as ever. They exchanged rings, kissed gently, and turned to the guests as husband and wife. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed, people rose to their feet. I stayed seated. Myra leaned toward me. "Now?" she asked. "Not yet," I whispered. The couple made their way down the aisle, hand in hand, pausing to pose for photos, laughing with friends. Serena kissed Julian's cheek, and he pulled her in with a theatrical flourish. I sat motionless, hands in my lap, my breath slow and shallow. The reception tent opened, and guests began filing toward it. I turned to Myra and gave her a single nod. She rose, opened her briefcase, and walked with calm precision toward the couple as they posed beneath the floral arch. Serena noticed her first, her brow creasing in confusion. Julian turned, his smile faltering when he recognized her. "Congratulations," Myra said evenly. "This is for you, from your mother." She handed the envelope to Julian, then turned and gave the second one to Serena. Before either of them could say a word, Myra walked away, returning to my side. "Done," she said quietly. I stood slowly, gripping the handle of my cane. Across the lawn, I watched Julian open the envelope. His face changed immediately. First confusion, then disbelief, then panic. He flipped through the pages. My new will, the donation records, the letter. He looked up, and our eyes met across the vineyard. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I turned and walked back toward the car. Let him have his photos. Let him keep this one moment. Because everything after this, it would belong to me. Julian stood frozen, the manila envelope trembling in his hands. Around him, guests kept clapping, laughing, toasting. A photographer adjusted his lens, preparing for another round of shots. But Julian didn't move. His face had gone pale beneath his warm brown skin. The veins in his temples twitched. His lips parted slightly, like the words on the page had stolen the breath from him. Serena peered over his shoulder, irritated. What is it? Why is she here again? What is this? She snatched the second envelope Myra had given her and tore it open. Inside was a single handwritten note penned in my script on ivory stationery. Serena, I won't make this about insults. I won't revisit the moment you looked me in the eye and spoke of putting me away like I was already dead. But I will say this. If you're marrying Julian for what you think you're getting, I suggest you find a new dress and a new life. He has nothing now. He earned it. Celeste Harper, Serena's jaw fell open. What the hell does that mean? She demanded. Julian didn't answer. He was still flipping through the documents Myra had enclosed. Pages of carefully formatted text, signed and notarized. The will was unmistakable. Every asset I owned, my properties, my bank accounts, my share in the flower shop, had been left to the Magnolia Haven Trust. Nothing for him, not a dime. No trust fund, no house, not even the silver earrings he gave me as a child. The final page was a letter. Julian, you were born from love. You were raised with sacrifice. I scrubbed hospital floors so you could dream. I wore shoes until the soles cracked. I gave up what I needed so you could have what you wanted. And when I got sick, I still wanted you to have it all. Even though you hadn't called in weeks. Even though you never once came with me to treatment. I still wanted you to have the fruits of my labor. Until you opened your mouth and told me I was too ugly to be seen at your wedding. And that's when I realized I didn't fail as a mother. You failed as a son. So now I leave you nothing but your name. I hope you build something with it. Goodbye. He read it once. Then again, each time his hands trembled more violently. The polished smile he had worn like a mask cracked right down the center. A ripple moved through the guests. The pianist stopped mid-song. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" Serena turned to him, panic tightening her voice. Is this real? Tell me this isn't real, Julian. This is a joke, right? He looked at her. His face was pale. She left me nothing. Serena stared at him as if he had just confessed to being bankrupt. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She gave away everything? You told me she was dying. She is dying, he snapped. Exactly. Serena hissed. So what were you waiting for? You let her take everything because you couldn't pretend to respect her for 3 hours. He said nothing. Her eyes darted wildly around the venue. People were watching now. Phones were out. Whispers turned into stares. She took a step back from him. I'm not marrying a broke man who can't even control his own mother. The words landed harder than any slap. Julian reached for her hand. Serena, please, this doesn't change us. We can still... She yanked her hand away. You embarrassed me. You let her humiliate me. I didn't know she was sitting right there. Serena turned, pointing toward the third row. You let her come to the wedding. The crowd fell silent. The entire reception tent froze. Julian turned slowly toward the seat where I had been. I was gone. All that remained was a folded scarf, blue with silver thread, gently laid across the chair. Deliberately left. Serena turned sharply and stormed off, bouquet abandoned in the grass. Her bridesmaids clattered after her, heels clicking, whispers trailing like smoke. Julian stood alone beneath the floral arch where vows had just been exchanged. The photographer lowered his camera. One of the guests, a distant cousin who had known me back in the day, stepped forward. He placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. Son, he said quietly, that woman walked through hell to raise you. You should have let her sit in the front row. Julian didn't speak. He just stood there, the envelope in one hand, his wedding unraveling in the other. Myra stood at a distance, watching. By then I had already returned home. I was seated by the window, sipping tea. I didn't need to see it to know it happened. I didn't need to hear it to feel it. I had waited for this moment. And it came. Quiet, deliberate, final. I looked toward the streetlight flickering on across the road and whispered to myself, this is for every mother who was ever told she wasn't enough. And this time, the tears that slipped down my cheek weren't from sorrow. They were from peace. The funny thing about beating cancer is that no one expects you to win quietly. They expect the triumphant speech, the survivor photo, the gleaming smile beside a doctor in a hospital hallway. But when my oncologist called, when she said the treatment worked, when she told me the scans were clear, I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just looked out the window, folded the news gently into my chest like a note only I needed to read, and said, "Good," because I had already made peace with dying. But now, I had something better. Peace while living. I didn't tell Julian. He didn't deserve to know. I let him believe I was gone. Let the lawyer follow my instructions. Let the obituary run. Let the silence do the rest. The world mourned me, but I was very much alive. I left Savannah 2 days after the wedding, quietly, no goodbyes, no suitcase of regrets, just a leather handbag, my passport, and one final letter left on Myra's kitchen counter. It read simply, "It's done, thank you." I now live in a coastal village in southern Spain. The air smells of oranges and sea salt. My neighbors don't know my name. I tell them to call me Ally. I rent a small house with blue shutters and an old courtyard. In the afternoons, I sit there with mint and basil growing at my feet, a blanket across my knees, and tea in my hands. I still have some money. Not a fortune. Most of that I gave away, but enough. Enough to buy my time. Enough to keep the lights on. Enough to start again in a place where no one thinks I'm a ghost or a burden. There are days the stillness aches. Some mornings, the quiet weighs more than any memory. I wake up reaching for noise, for a voice, for movement, for something that reminds me I once mattered to someone. Then I remember. I matter to myself now. That has to be enough. There's a quiet power in becoming invisible by choice, no longer erased but self-removed. In this silence, I've discovered how loud dignity can be. Every morning breeze, every wave that brushes the shore reminds me I did not run away. I chose to begin again, somewhere no one would expect to find a woman like me, standing tall in her own stillness. Back home, I hear they're still talking. Myra told me that the Magnolia Haven Trust renamed its main building Harper Hall. Apparently, my story went viral. Donations flooded in. Someone uploaded a photo of me with the other women at the shelter. The caption read, "She gave us everything her family threw away." I never asked for the attention, but I'm glad it happened. Women started writing tributes. They shared their stories. Hashtags bloomed like wildflowers. Celeste deserved better. Grandma with the last word. Let her smile once more. They believed I was gone, and I let them. For Julian, losing me was the best thing that ever happened to him. It was the only thing that taught him anything. He tried to sue, so I've heard. Tried to get Myra to unseal the will, but it was airtight. Not even a sliver of light could get in. She handed him my final letter, signed with a steady hand and a peaceful heart. "I loved you, and you spat on it. I gave you everything you asked for. More than I should have. I would have given you the world. But you said I was too ugly to be in it. So now I live in one where you don't exist. Goodbye." He never got to apologize. He never got closure. And I'm not sorry. I gave him the platform. A calm, perfect moment to honor his mother. To show the world his heart. And when he did, the world saw it for what it was. Rotten, ungrateful, empty. As for me, I did not die bitter. I lived with intention. I'm drinking tea now while the sun turns the cobblestones gold. In the morning, I buy fresh bread. On Tuesdays, I walk to the market. The woman at the flower stall knows I like white lilies. I tell people I once had a husband. I don't. I tell them about the sun. Sometimes I think about the scarf I left behind. Blue with silver thread. Folded gently on that third-row chair. I hope someone picked it up. I hope someone wondered why it was placed so carefully. Let them wonder. Let them write poems about the woman who vanished. Let them tell my story at fundraisers and in foundation grants. Because the truth is, I am not at peace. I live in it. And as for Julian, he gets to live in silence. That's the only inheritance I left. Dear friend, not every goodbye is loud. Some are whispered in the quiet corners of our lives, between the slammed doors and forgotten birthdays, between the hospital visits that never happened and the chairs left empty at celebrations. But what if I told you that silence, too, can be a legacy? Sometimes dignity looks like walking away without applause. Sometimes power is found not in what you say, but in what you refuse to explain. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about rediscovering your worth after being overlooked for far too long. About choosing peace not because you lost, but because you finally realized you had nothing left to prove. In the teachings of the Stoics, there is a belief: you cannot control others, only your response to them. And for those who've been forgotten, misunderstood, or written off, this response becomes your liberation. You don't need the world's validation to know your value. You don't need an audience to make your stand matter. You simply need to live in truth, quietly and fully. If you've ever loved someone who couldn't love you back the way you deserved, this story is for you. If you've ever been cast aside yet found a way to rise with grace instead of vengeance, this story is your reflection. Because in the end, the silence we choose can be more powerful than the words we were denied. And remember, peace isn't something you find at the end of the road. It's something you build, step by quiet step, in every moment you choose yourself over the noise. With strength and stillness, if this story moved you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that matter.